Join me every month for the inspiration to find your finish line. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Find Your Finish Line. I'm Mike Riley, and thank you very much for listening in today. Team RWB. You've seen so many of their athletes competing in races, all kinds of endurance races throughout the country. We'll be talking with their CEO, Mike Irwin. But before we do, Pillar Performance, our presenting sponsor. They are a micronutrition company, and the easiest way to describe it is hydration and carbohydrate products that would take you through to the finish line. Pillar's mission is to get athletes to the start line in the best condition over and over again. Since I was introduced to the product back at Ironman New Zealand in 2021, I've been taking Pillar Triple Magnesium, and it's been a game changer for my sleep and recovery. I take it about 30 to 40 minutes before I go to bed each night. I get a deeper sleep, less cramps when I wake up in the morning, and my recovery is better for my next day's workout. Check out Pillar. You can get it, by the way, by going to thefeed.com/Pillar. Enter the code Finish Line, capital letters, all one word, Finish Line, for 15% off for first-time buyers of the Pillar product. And anywhere else in the world, head to pillarperformance.shop. Enter Finish Line for 15% off on first-time purchases. Now, for my guest today, his name is Mike Irwin. He is a United States military West Point graduate, seasoned leader, entrepreneur, and veteran with a rich background in military service and leadership development. He founded Team Red, White, and Blue, Team RWB, in 2010, a nonprofit aimed at enriching the lives of veterans by fostering social and physical connections in their communities. Under his leadership, the organization has grown significantly with 214 chapters and over 181,000 members globally. In addition to his work with Team RWB, Irwin co-founded the Positivity Project, an organization dedicated to teaching character and positive psychology to youth in over 600 schools across the U.S. He is also a published author, having co-written Lead Yourself First, a book on how solitude can enhance leadership. Irwin's illustrious military career includes service as an intelligence officer in the U.S. Army, with 3 deployments in both Iraq and Afghanistan. He earned 2 Bronze Stars during his combat tours and later served as an assistant professor at West Point, teaching psychology and leadership. Mike, what a heck of a resume. Welcome to Find Your Finish Line, buddy.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Mike. I appreciate it. And you might hear a rooster crowing in the background as I just heard you finishing up the introduction. So that is not fake. That is, in fact, real. If you hear that again, I apologize.
Well, I usually have a first question on Find Your Finish Line. I'm going to forego that and ask it as my second question. But you are... McDonald's has a farm. Tell us about where you live and what your daily life's all about.
Yeah. So, as we were just chatting about, so I live about an hour south of Raleigh, North Carolina, and moved out to a 42-acre farm about 5 years ago, a little before COVID struck. And we've got a little bit of everything: chickens, turkeys, pigs, goats, dairy cows, beef cows. And, sometimes the chickens get a little bit too close to my office, which is right above the barn. And sometimes you hear them crowing in the background. But, my typical day is really very, as you might imagine, action-packed. When you live on a homestead or in a farm, there's always things that go wrong. And so you have to be in constant problem-solving mode. Yeah. And just also chores. Like, one of the great things about chores is it reminds me a lot, actually, of Ironman training, of running. It's just the same thing over and over again. Literally every day I'm carrying water, I'm carrying food, and sometimes like shoveling out coops. There's nothing sexy about it. There's nothing impressive about it. It's just putting in the work. But when you do that day after day, it compounds. And eventually you just get addicted to the work of the motion that comes with living on a farm.
Your work is tough, but work yet is so rewarding. And Mike, the question I always ask my guests, because I'll have Ironman athletes, triathletes, runners, coaches on as guests. And my first question is always, what kind of workout did you get in today? And I always kind of try to catch people like maybe they didn't get a workout in, they're a little embarrassed. But I don't need to ask you that question because today you've probably shoveled more poop and hauled stuff than any of us ever will.
Yeah. Well, I did that. And the good news is, and one of the things we'll talk about at Team Red, White, and Blue is called the BFG, the Big Fitness Goal, which is what we encourage all of our members to choose every year. For me this year, for the first time in 11 years, I'm going back to the JFK 50 miler. In Maryland. And so I put in a 9-mile run this morning. And so I also put that in on top of the farm work. So,
well, good for you. Now you're making all our guests feel guilty. I'm glad I got a workout in this morning, or I would really feel guilty. Mike, before we jump into Team RWB, what do you think your biggest lesson learned was from attending West Point when you look back at it?
There's a lot of lessons you learn there. Some of them are in books by what you study, and a lot of them, though, are through experience and the conversations you have with people. I think the biggest thing that I learned about West Point was the power of servant leadership. When you think about people in leadership roles, there's often a bit of a negative connotation for some people with that word because they think of leadership as something that's all about power. And they think that leadership is about going from one lily pad to the next and continuing to sort of climb the ladder. And that's really not at the core of what good leadership is about. It's about service. It's about how do you make other people's lives better? How do you help them to grow and to become better? And then as a team come together to accomplish things that you could not accomplish on your own. And so to me, that's probably the biggest lesson that I learned there is that yes, leadership takes on many angles and flavors and forms, but the most powerful variety of leadership is servant leadership.
And we were connected, Mike, by Pete Jackson, who is my daughter-in-law's father, and Pete is a West Pointer. And I just wanted to give a shout out to him for setting this all up because Pete's, he introduced me more to RWB here in Southern California. And then I started seeing all the athletes at the races. So thank you to Pete.
Absolutely. Yeah. Pete K was a big supporter from the very beginning in 2010, 2011. And so one of our biggest and strongest chapters was in San Diego. A guy by the name of Joe Molina, former Navy SEAL, started the chapter. And Pete just did such a great job at helping to foster and to fuel the fire that our chapter in San Diego had.
So leadership just doesn't happen overnight, as you know. But Mike, what point in your life where you started to believe you had those types of qualities that it would take you down the path you're leading today? I mean,
it's a great question. The two answers. One is that I knew it from a very young age. My parents actually saved my report card from 1986 with Mrs. Flynn. She was my kindergarten teacher, and she put on the notes, Mike, you're a great little boy. Someday you will be a leader of men. Like that's what she put on my report card.
In kindergarten.
Wow. I have no idea what she saw, if she just saw maybe I'm a very enthusiastic person, so I don't know if she saw that. But lots of kids are enthusiastic. So, I don't know if she saw my ability to influence other people, but she saw something that she
saw something. Yeah.
They put it down on a report card. And so I tell that story a lot because it's a reminder to all of us to never underestimate the power of our words. And especially when we see potential in people, because I actually wrote my application to go to West Point based upon that. I said, back in 1986 in kindergarten, my teacher, Mrs. Flynn, saw leadership potential in me, and I want to come here to maximize and optimize that potential. But beyond that, we all go through life and you're fumbling through it, especially as a kid and a teenager. And I didn't necessarily view myself as like being any sort of, more significant leader than a lot of my peers. I guess through sports, I played baseball and basketball. I saw a little bit of leadership opportunities there, but I do think that a lot of it started to come into clarity for me at the end of my sophomore year and into my junior year. And I started to seek out more leadership opportunities in my high school. And then when I went down and I visited West Point and I saw how seriously they take leadership development and how they take these 18, 19, 20-year-olds and pour into them, I realized that the art and the science of leadership development is actually very robust. And it became very interesting to me. So I started reading some books about leadership as probably a 16, 17-year-old. But it really wasn't until I got there that I understood just how far I had to go to become a leader who could, by the age of 22, stand in front of his platoon, getting ready to go to deploy to Iraq, and to feel qualified to do that.
What would you say? I didn't even have this down as a question, but it hit me because obviously young people do bumble through life. It's very difficult, especially in those 7th grade, 8th grade. Then you go to high school. Like, what the heck? What kind of advice would you give them, and even give their parents? Because not everybody's going to go to a military academy or be based in a leadership program. They just go through school and hopefully go to college and go beyond. But what advice would you give that youngster that is kind of looking for something?
Yeah, so I would start by saying, I'm a co-founder and a chairman of the board for a private independent Catholic high school here outside Fort Bragg, Fort Liberty in North Carolina. And so I teach the 11th graders every Wednesday. I volunteer teach. My son is a 9th grader. My daughter is a 7th grader. So right in that window that you talked about, that I tell people all the time, grades 7 to 10, hold on.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's just like, it's going to be messy. It's going to be choppy. Kids are trying to figure themselves out. But I love seeing the metamorphosis that happens between 10th and 11th grade with almost every student. And then definitely by 12th grade, you mature so much between age 13 and 16, but especially that 1 year seems to be the big one, sophomore year to junior year. Mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest things I'd say, Mike, and there's a whole book out there on this right now, called The Anxious Generation. And it's really about the power of technology. And while it's awesome in many ways, it's also really bad for the development, the social development, the mental development, for so many of our youngsters in society today. So I would say work really hard to be present with people, whether you're doing a podcast or you're doing a Zoom meeting or you're obviously in person with people. Be present with people, because it's really hard to do that in the world today when you've got your phone and you have all these distractions that just swirl around you. And I think that if you can starve yourself of all those distractions and noise, then that will give you some more clarity to what you should be doing next in your next step. But I do think that so much of the struggle that people go through today is because they allow that noise to overwhelm them, and it drowns out the peace of mind, and it drowns out the clarity in their minds that they're seeking.
It's the old adage, you've only got control over one thing and one thing itself, and that's your attitude and what's inside of you. The things outside of us, we don't have control over a lot of it. And if we've let it affect us, we end up going down the wrong path. That's right. Like when you founded Team RWB back in 2010, at that time, I know you wanted to start an organization and do good, but what was your main goal? The main reason why you wanted to form it?
So when I finished up my third deployment in the summer of 2009, I went right from there and I transitioned to graduate school at the University of Michigan, where I was in the personality psychology PhD program. And I got there, and the best way I could describe it, Mike, is like I was a fish out of water. I was 28 years old. I had just finished my third deployment to Iraq or Afghanistan, and all of my peers in my program were 23, 24 years old. They did not have that experience of deploying to Iraq or Afghanistan, and so I felt very just different from them. But I also felt that they didn't understand, not no fault of their own, but they didn't really understand what I had been through and what I had been doing for the past 7+ years of my life, which was deploying or preparing to deploy and going back over. And so part of this was, my mentor, Jim Collins, refers to this as muddy boot entrepreneurship, where it's the kind of entrepreneurship where your boots are muddy and wet. And so you want to go build a better boot so that your feet don't get cold and dirty. So I started to want to build an organization that would serve me and people like me who I knew were feeling the similar sorts of feelings. That, hey, I don't feel like understood, and I don't feel that people really even know where to start with asking me about my service and asking me about what I've seen. The other part of the coin, though, the flip side of the coin here is that I came from a very elite unit where I was the intel officer. So I was not a Green Beret, but I was an intel officer in support of just in a really elite unit. And they made some pretty comments to get under my skin before I left for grad school. And they said, "Oh, Irwin, you're going to get so soft. You're going to grad school. You're not going to have to go out there and impress us Green Berets anymore with your running time." And so they kind of challenged it and did predict what happens to a lot of people when they transition out of the Army. And I still was in the Army, but essentially for 2 years I was out of it because I didn't have really any obligations. And that is that you stop working out. You go from working out every day. It's part of your routine. It's part of who you are. And then all of a sudden it stops, because you no longer have to show up at 6:30 in the morning and be accountable to other people and put in the workout. And so that was the other side of this, is that they said, don't let that happen. Make sure that you stay physically active, because they could tell that it would be very important for me as I left, my military unit and went to grad school.
Well, and that's probably where you discovered staying active really fends off a lot of the demons you can have when you come back from military service, because if you don't have that, you take it out. And I've had people on in my book, Mike Irwin, who came back after a deployment and, wanted to end his life, but started figuring out, well, I'll go for a run. And, things started happening again for him. So, but you've got also, you're a runner. When you started, when you formed RWB, not everybody's a runner. How did you incorporate different activities with the organization?
So absolutely true that we actually had this thing that became a saying across the organization is Team RWB, we don't just run. Because, early on in that first year, so much of it was running. It was the JFK 50 miler and the Marine Corps marathon. And there was a lot of running in that first, couple of years. But it actually started by two Army veterans, Steve Burns and Brittany Meeks. They reached out and they said, "Hey, we're both triathletes. We're training for Ironmans. What do you think about us using our training to talk about Team Red, White, and Blue and talk about veteran reintegration?" It's like, great. And then our breakthrough moment, as you may recall, is I got connected I had just come back from a deployment in 2009. One of my friends who was in the Navy, who I deployed with, said, "Hey, have you heard of this guy named Tim O'Donnell?" I'm like, I think I've heard of the name. He said, "Yeah. He is an incredible triathlete, and he's my classmate from the Naval Academy." And so they connected me to Tim, and Tim was kind of just on the ascent. I don't think he had actually, I think he was just crossing over into Ironman distance from the shorter distance. And yeah, it was pretty amazing to see, he sniffed us out. He wanted to make sure, hey, these guys are new. Before I go putting their logo on my kit and start talking about them, it probably would help to make sure that I know who they are. But he vetted us through some of his friends, who are Navy SEALs that, hey, I know Mike Irwin and what he's trying to do here. And I know a lot of the people who are involved in it. And so, yeah, that got TO to get behind us. And that really propelled us into the triathlon world, because a lot of people who wanted to do something and they wanted to help to support veterans, but they also loved their sport of triathlon, they realized they could do it by supporting Team Red, White, and Blue. And so we got into triathlon and we got into trail running beyond just road running. And then we got into CrossFit and yoga. So we started picking up these different modalities. And honestly, Mike, it was driven by our members. By members who were saying, hey, I love triathlon and I want to do it for Team Red, White, and Blue. I love CrossFit and I want to do it for Team Red, White, and Blue. So it really did become about the idea of empowering our members to choose what modalities of fitness they wanted to help raise awareness and funds for our programs.
Yeah, Tim O'Donnell was a big proponent, and I remember bringing him in the races. And then after that, Mike, I started seeing more and more RWB and my connection to Pete Jackson. And I would, everybody has something on their singlet when they come on in, different sponsors or whatever it may be. Yep. But I always give a loud shout out to Team RWB, and they're always waving at me. And so I'm so glad they're part of the triathlon.
Yeah, we appreciated that. All those years and all those shout outs to Team Red, White, and Blue members coming down the chute. It was awesome.
So, Mike, firsthand, obviously, the physical aspects, but there's also what I believe the social aspects of helping veterans come back and try to assimilate themselves. And so do you think, obviously they can go out and run on their own and everything, but socially to be able to be with their kind and then
Yes.
be in a race with 3,000 people, not all of them are veterans.
Right.
The social aspect has to be just as big.
It's huge. Absolutely. One of the biggest things that we learned from the research of positive psychology, which is what I was studying in grad school, is that the number one predictor and driver of our life satisfaction is the quality of our relationships with other people. And so you can go for that, go to the pain cave and go for a long bike ride, or on the trainer on your own. You can go for a run on your own. You can swim on your own. You can do all those things on your own. But ultimately, making sure that you do some of those things with other people is really important. Not only, as you know, right, if you're going on a training ride or a swim, when you're doing it with other people, they make you go faster, right? And so there's a training component of it. But there's also the idea of suffering alongside and with other people, how it brings you closer together. And that's a huge part of our mission, is that it's not just about helping people to be better, like from a physical health standpoint, because that's obviously a big part of it, but it's the mental and the emotional and the social aspect of life as well. And we saw this in the data when you look back at COVID, when people were separated from each other and they didn't have relationships, the percentage of Americans with clinical levels of anxiety and depression compared to today, they just ran a study just recently just showing how a lot of people have bounced back. But those periods of isolation and separation took a real toll on people's happiness, on their overall well-being, on their mental health. And so that's a big part of what we do at Team Red, White, and Blue as well, is to say, hey, to be healthy is not just to go out there and to put in a good run or a good ride. It's also to connect with other human beings.
Mike, did you have any inclination at all when you started Team RWB that it would have the global reach that it's got today?
No, I mean, I'm just being straight honest. Like, absolutely not. Some people start companies or organizations and they're like, oh yeah, I totally predicted. Like, I knew that this was going to happen. No, not at all. We started out very small, Mike. The initial focus was on trying to partner with 10 wounded veterans and their families in that period of time where they struggled with the transition from active duty or guard or reserves. And we just started hearing from people writing into our website daily, and then multiple people per day, and then tens of people per day, saying that, hey, like, this is awesome that we're trying to help other veterans out, but like, physical activity or running or sport saved my life. I was in a bad spot, and my ability to go out and go for a run is what allowed me to still be here. So yes, I want to be an ambassador for this organization. I want to let other veterans know that they can tap into the power of physical activity to change and sometimes save their life.
Yeah, that is what has to be some of the most rewarding things you've seen. I know you to go through and think of all the individuals you touch and the ones you've been face to face with and shook their hands and brought them back. That's got to be one of the most rewarding things about putting the organization together, when you see a military veteran, man or woman, back on their feet again.
Yeah, I mean, nothing can prepare you for hearing from somebody when they tell you, they come up to you, they see you somewhere, and they say, because of this organization, that you started, I'm still here, because I was in a really bad place in 2000 and whatever. And what this organization did for me in those moments was not a game changer, but it was a life changer. And it's obviously so many people are in the process to help veterans do that. We've got so many volunteer leaders and staff members and board members, but really it's our volunteer leaders that exist across the country, and empowering them to reach as many veterans as possible, especially those that are struggling and those that are in need, is enormous. And it's what allows us to have this outsized impact. We're only a 30 staff member organization. We're decent size, but we're not anywhere near the behemoth nonprofits, that you often see out there. And so our impact, we punch way above our weight class from a budget standpoint and from a revenue standpoint. And the reason why is because we've got so many volunteers that are so passionate. And you've met some of these people at our races, and they love to inspire fellow veterans and be there for them. And yeah, it's pretty incredible when you see that happening in real time.
And you volunteer. I had that as a question a little later, but I want to jump into that because volunteers, garnering volunteers to try to get them to come to a race and help and stuff. You're asking one of their time, their most valuable possession,
yes,
to give to someone else. But with your volunteers, I have to believe that it came from an act of knowing a veteran, having one in the family, or knowing what those men and women went through. But is it hard to recruit volunteers or no for you?
So I will tell you that in the early days, when we were a lot closer to 9/11 and when we were still having large-scale deployments taking place, people came out in droves to volunteer. I will say that for sure now, 23 years after 9/11, after the befuddled withdrawal of Afghanistan in 2021, closing out Iraq, years before that, there is definitely not the level of commitment that a lot of Americans feel to supporting military veterans. I don't get mad about it. I don't get frustrated about it. It just is what it is. Military and veterans used to be in the news a lot, in the media a lot. A lot of people would talk about things like PTSD and talk about the struggles that a lot of veterans face. And that is definitely not the case. And it hasn't been the case really since about 2018. And so we do not have the volume of volunteers coming out like we did in our heyday in 2012, 13, 14, 15. And so, we've had to adjust and to adapt. At one point we had 2,100 what we call Eagle leaders, they were certified leaders, volunteer leaders in our organization. That number is down to more like 600 today. Just to give you an idea of that.
Wow.
We don't have as many chapters active today as we used to. And again, this is, a reflection of how times have changed. The world's gotten more technological. There isn't as many in-person demand for people to go out there and to do events. And so we still got a lot of it going on, just not as much as we used to. And so, I think it is important to remind people and anyone listening, anyone who might know those, as they think about how to volunteer and how to serve, that there's a lot of organizations out there that do need and rely heavily on volunteers to be able to change lives. And we're one of them.
And to be a volunteer with Team RWB, you do not have to be a veteran.
Nope.
Correct? Yeah.
Nope, that's correct. A lot of our members and volunteers, Mike, 70% are what we call VGRADs, Veteran Guard Reserve Active Duty, which means that about 1 out of 3 is not. And so, you can get involved and be a part of the team and all the things, even if you're not a veteran, and that's something that from our very beginning we believe strongly in, that, veterans don't live in veteran communes when they take off the uniform. And so interacting with people who have served and those who have not, I think is very helpful. And so we've seen a lot of civilians step forward to be volunteer leaders in our organization.
Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe you started the organization to try to be able to match the camaraderie that your men and women, brethren, and in the military services when they come out, because your camaraderie, I've got so many friends that you have buddies and people at West Point that you're going to be friends for life, and you can not talk to them for 5 years and talk to them like it was yesterday. But you tried to get close to that, didn't you? When they come on out, okay, there's another community we can be a part of to try to create that camaraderie that you were so used to for serving for our country.
Totally, yeah. And we know that we're not going to be able to match the esprit de corps and the camaraderie that you would see, in the military unit. Because part of it's like you do life together, right? Sometimes you live in the barracks or you deploy together, and you sleep in tents next to each other. When you go out to the field, you're right there with each other. And then obviously, you work together in the motor pool, jumping out of airplanes, whatever it might be. So we can't match that, but that was exactly our goal. What you just said is how can we get as much of that camaraderie and that sense of belonging and inspiration as possible, so that veterans know that, hey, I may not be able to have it exactly like it was when I was, in the Marine Corps or in the Air Force, but this sense of belonging and this sense of pride and identity that I get when I put on that Team Red, White, and Blue shirt. And when I see other people wearing that shirt and like we see each other and we shout each other out at races and we do that, like that's been one of the really cool things about the organization is creating like the community pretty much wherever you go when you see someone wearing this shirt.
You know, what I think is also cool about it, a little bit in a humorous way, because I know what it's like with I'm living in a Navy town and saying Army, Navy, and football games. Are you kidding me? What do you mean you went to Annapolis? That's like the words they use for that and vice versa. But yet your organization, just like you say, you brought Tim O'Donnell in, a Navy veteran, and you're an Army guy. And it's amazing how the branches of the military, when they come on out, they look at themselves more as one than they ever thought they would.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's one of the things we talk about, the joint fight. Like you deploy, especially at the higher levels, Air Force and Marine Corps and Army, Navy, Coast Guard, like you're all working together. And that's what Team Red, White, and Blue is. We've got veterans from every service, from every generation. We had, people, we had a couple of Korean War veterans, but certainly a lot of Vietnam War veterans. Yeah. We've had a lot of veterans who never deployed because they were in the 90s or they were in at a time when they couldn't deploy. Because there wasn't a deployment to go to. So, we've got the diversity of the veteran community is huge. We got people from small towns and big cities and people who love to run and those that hate to run and people that, you name it. So the diversity, of the organization, all the different branches, the different ages, the different fitness levels. And again, what unites us is the eagle, our logo and our identity that, hey, we are all collectively here working to help veterans be healthier in their post-military lives. And that's not easy. And so we need everyone rowing and working together. Yeah,
by the way, that's a great logo because I could see it a long way down the chute as it was coming in. So that made it fantastic. And I tell you, I love living in San Diego because it's San Diego, but the other reason is because of the military presence here. And when you go to a San Diego Padres game, about the fourth inning or so, the announcer says, to all our veterans, please stand up and be saluted by everybody else. And I tell you what, it's like a third of the crowd stands up, the veterans here in San Diego. And I'm glad we recognize them. And the applause is just thunderous when they all stand up.
That's awesome.
The virtual world, we're talking with Mike Irwin, CEO of Team RWB, a military veteran. And Mike, with the virtual world we live in today, that wasn't around when you started the organization, but the athletes can even participate in virtual events, can't they?
Yes, absolutely. A big part of what we've done is over time is realize that, hey, we can't put on 1,000,001 chapter events per year, that we need to be able to reach veterans and to really try to change their behavior and change their habits as they think about living a healthier life. And so through our apps, you can easily download the app, Team RWB, in the App Store, join the team. And in there, you'll see everything from virtual challenges to opportunities to link up with people in person. But a lot of it is also centered around training, right? One of our new programs called Eagle Fit. We're working hard to help veterans to be better when it comes to grip strength, when it comes to their balance, when it comes to some of these things that we know are so important, especially as we get older. It's one thing, when you're 28 years old and you're young, dumb, and you can take on the world. But as you get in, to your 40s and 50s and 60s, like you've got to get smarter when it comes to your health, or else, and that's for everything from how much alcohol you drink to how much caffeine you drink to what you eat to how much you move your body to how you sleep. All these things have always mattered, but they really start to matter and take a toll on you as you get older. And so, a big part of our app is trying to educate and remind and inspire veterans to be thoughtful about their health habits, that eating, sleeping, what they drink, all that kind of stuff. And working really hard with them to understand that it's not just about going out for that run or that workout. It is also about the bigger picture of how are you living your life in terms of what you put into your body and how you treat your body.
And Tim O'Donnell is the biggest proponent, just because you're fit and a good athlete and can run a race fast doesn't always mean you're healthy. You got to have the complete balance of it all. And if you don't, things happen like Tim, had a heart issue. He knocked him down, but oh yeah, I got to get healthy too, even though I can finish second at an Ironman World Championship.
Right. It's
Do you
crazy
still,
when you think about that.
I know it blows you away, and it happens way too much. Do you still must believe, because you're a face-to-face guy, I know you are, that personal contact is the key to it all.
Absolutely. This is the thing. We know the data from the data. It's really clear that being together in person, breaking bread, having a drink, a cup of coffee, going for a run or a workout together, driving places, like going to a ball game or a concert together. The magic of life is still what we do with other people. And the world it's gotten more and more digital, and Team RWB Blue has found ways to support that, but we still very much drive the message and remind veterans that it's in their best interest to go out there and to find other people in their community, and ideally the Team RWB Blue community, to get together with in person. Because being together in person with people, just biologically, physiologically, psychologically, all the things, it's just proven to make a big difference in your overall health and well-being. And one of the great concerns is, certainly it started in COVID, but the great concerns that a lot of people have is that we're getting more and more virtual reality, more and more digital, in our lives. And there's got to get to a point, I think, where it's like enough is enough, and like let's not forget to go outside and live our life.
Well, I think one of the biggest parts of it too is it's not just about going to an event on the weekend. It's about training with your brethren and putting in the hard miles and workouts, whether it's CrossFit or going for a run or getting on your bike. So the training aspect is also very big, and I think that is huge for you guys.
That's
so
right.
you formed some pretty impressive partnerships. I'm remiss if you still don't have them, but with Nike and Starbucks and Amazon, you still work with them. How do they help Team RWB?
Yeah, we've got a lot of partners. This goes back, Mike, to your comment earlier about our brand and the logo. That logo is, the eagle with crisp wings, but the body is a star, which is like one of those like unique things you can kind of see in there. But yeah, like a lot of organizations realize that being associated with and being able to show how you support veterans is not just good to do to help out, but also it's smart. And we've got BMW as one of our strongest brand partners right now. And, hey, they're a German-owned company, but they've got a huge factory with 13,000 jobs in South Carolina, and they love to hire a lot of veterans. And, so they are, have been investing in Team RWB Blue to, one, help to grow their brand awareness, within the veteran community, but also to let veterans who are leaving the military know that, hey, we got jobs here and we like to hire veterans. And so brands that see that bigger picture are always inspiring to me. And they're one of them. Yingling Beer. I know beer's not like necessarily at the forefront, but they're big in the fitness space. Like they're up there with like Michelob Ultra in terms of really prioritizing, the fitness and being there for that. But yeah, we got a lot of great partners and brands, CVS and Nike's donated to 15 to 20,000 shirts per year for the past decade. So yeah, corporations are great. Like the money is nice, but it's really when they're able to leverage what they do to make a difference. That's, I think, the opportunity where it has the biggest impact.
Especially giving the veterans the opportunity to work and get back into the mainstream of work.
That's right.
Mike, can you think of a particular success story or person that you came in contact with and you touched and it inspired you? Because some people go through absolute hell when they do come back, and some, sorry to say, don't come out of that hell.
Yeah,
but
totally.
You've touched some people that they have gone to the other side. And do you think anybody in particular, a success story that you had?
Yeah, there's so many. I mentioned earlier, I've probably heard over the years from, I'm going to say about 250 to 300 veterans, from Facebook messages to text messages to emails to in person, talking about that they're alive because of this organization and what it did for them. One of the most powerful stories for me is actually from the very founding. There's a guy named Ira. Ira's an Army veteran. He was from Michigan. He got shot in the head. His Kevlar hit his Kevlar, and somehow like it stopped it and slowed it down enough, but it hit him into his head, and like probably in a previous conflict or war would have bled out, but like was able to get the treatment that he needed to be able to stop the bleeding. But I was one of these guys where he heard about RWB, and for the first 2 or 3 years, he just listened. He sat on the sidelines. He came out to a social event here and there, but then he saw Team Red, White, and Blue running enough and said, you know what? I'm going to give that running thing a try again, that the Army used to make me do. Before you know it, he's out there running, 5Ks, 10Ks. I think he did a half marathon carrying the American flag, in the Detroit area. And it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable when you hear the power, of his testimony about how Team Red, White, and Blue has made his life so much better. And then he became a volunteer leader for us, and he went on to just do like lots of great things, and it had a positive effect on his relationships and other parts of his life. So, he's an example that comes to my mind, but just so many different people have had their lives transformed or saved because of being involved in Team Red, White, and Blue.
And then one of the greatest things for you to see is how they probably pass it on. It just doesn't end with them. They've got to want to go out there and pass it on to others. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And I mentioned that earlier about servant leadership, the idea of, hey, if you've benefited from something, taking some of that gift and that blessing and turning around and paying it forward and helping other people out. But that's so much of what we try to drive into our organization, because our society and our country is kind of really pushed to very much an individualistic focus. And, your news feed is curated to what you like. And, people are constantly trying to customize the experience for us. And, we really kind of push a bit of not a counter message, but definitely a different message. And that is that it's not about you. It's about making a difference for other people. And that when you do that, it actually feels good for you. And that's the irony of it, is that when we help other people out, it actually makes us feel better.
How has it made Mike Irwin feel better? You're a better person because of it. Does it infiltrate your life every day?
Oh, every day. Every day. And especially on those days when you're down or you're out or you're not feeling great, you can simply reflect back to and think about those people who were suffering or struggling, who, you helped to make a difference in their life, but yeah, it's totally changed my life. I thought that service was primarily something that you did in the military or maybe a first responder, or a police officer. But what it's done for me is it's opened the aperture and it's broadened my understanding of what service is and all the various ways to serve, especially when we take off the uniform. I've been off active duty now for 9 years, but I'm still in the reserves, and I still know about the importance of service. But for me, it's opened up my understanding to know that one of the many ways that we serve, is through volunteerism and through nonprofits. And so I volunteer and deliver meals to people who are shut in via Meals on Wheels with my kids every other Friday. And you find ways to get involved and to help other people out, and for me, that's the biggest thing that I'm try to do is as often as I can, how do I make a difference in the lives of other people?
Yeah, because service can reward you more than you can imagine once you jump into it. That's fantastic.
That's exactly right.
Mike, if they want to become part of Team RWB, they want to run a race, they want to be one of your ambassadors, how can they find you, and what's the best way for them to sign up?
Great question. So easiest way, go to your app store and just download Team RWB and join the team. So whether you're a veteran or not, you're welcome on the team. We want you on the team. And you fill out a basic profile. What's really cool, Mike, is we've got a social net we've built over time over the past 4 or 5 years, a social network that is free of all the bad stuff. So think about, so we don't capture and sell your data. We don't market to you in there and try to sell you stuff. We don't have an algorithm that tries to keep you doom scrolling. There's no divisiveness or political. It's all veterans, health, and wellness content. And it's examples of, you can go there and just see thousands of veterans who are sharing their health journey. They're screenshotting their swim or their bike or their run or, the CrossFit training session they just had. It's all positive. It's all inspirational. and it's all in one place. So when you join what we call our digital garrison, Team Red, White, and Blues app community, our virtual community that you see in our app, which we call the digital garrison, you can see and interact with so many different veterans and be inspired by them, but then also contribute inspiration into them as well.
Do you have support of the military branches and the VA, for example?
We do. We've got a memorandum of understanding, an MOU with the VA, one of the few nonprofits that has that, where they recognize us not only as best in class, but they recognize what we're doing as focusing on veterans' holistic health as being really strategically important. So in terms of the active duty, they don't necessarily partner with or choose nonprofits that they align with because it's called joint ethics regs, that they basically don't do that. But in their free time, lots of active duty folks are leaders in and involved in Team Red, White, and Blue for sure.
Well, Mike, my final question on Find Your Finish Line is always the same. It comes out, I've got friends that race the Baja 1000 in the trophy trucks, and and I've raced down there with them. It's intense. Afterwards, they get together and they call it table racing, where they just reminisce about the race or another race and bring up things. I call this tri-table racing. Reminisce with us, and I know you're training for the RFK 50 miler, but reminisce with us a race you've done, something that happened at the race or that finish line or whatever at a moment in time. So table race with us.
Yeah. For me, my stomach, usually once it gets around 6 hours or so, I struggle to put calories down, and I've read about people who just have got incredible discipline and they just keep powering down 400 calories an hour. They just, it keeps fueling them to keep going. So I'm going to try to really get more mentally tough this year and force calories down. But for me, one of my big memories is when I had trained for the JFK 50 and I was this close, I wanted to break an 8:45 and I did it. And I got an 8:52 because I started cramping up in the last, 8 or 10 miles or so. And I'd have to stop and, pound on my quads and my hamstrings to kind of get then I would go for another 4 or 5 minutes until the cramps came back in. But, I think about those times, and while they hurt and while it wasn't fun in the moment, I certainly remember them with a smile because, it's part of what made running the race so memorable and so powerful. So I'd say that's, for me, is one of the ones that comes to my mind.
Yeah, the old adage of racing, during the race, you're going, what the heck am I doing? Here I am pounding on my calves, my stomach hurts. And afterwards, all you're doing is bragging to everybody about how great of a race it was. So,
that's awesome.
Well, Mike Irwin,
great.
Thank you very much for your time from the farm. You know what? Everybody should have that type of discipline and hard work in their lives as a natural thing, and you've got it. So I'm jealous of that.
Yeah.
Thank you to you for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it over all the years, all the shout outs to Team Red, White, and Blue, finishing the Ironmans, and for bringing me on here to talk about our organization, why I love it and so passionate about Team Red, White, and Blue, and why I look forward to seeing some people join the team, downloading those apps, and becoming a part of RWB because of this. I really appreciate it.
You got it. And thank you again to Pillar Performance for their presenting sponsorship of Find Your Finish Line. As always, stay strong out there, everyone, in all aspects of your life, and find your finish line. Take care. Aloha.